why I love watching older films. It's considering the ways that they were able to achieve things that are still impressive with older technology. Hey everybody, my name is Nick. I'm a director living in Taiwan, and today I want to talk about the Japanese horror film called Kwaidan. Kwaidan translates to ghost story. The film is made up of 4 vignettes, 4 ghost stories that were adapted from Japanese folktales.
The 4 stories are The Black Hair, a morality tale about a swordsman who leaves his devout wife for a wealthy woman. The Woman of the Snow, about a woodcutter who is trapped in a snowstorm and whose life is spared by the Woman of the Snow, a ghost, in exchange for a promise. Hoichi the Earless, about a young blind musician who plays the biwa for the undead. In a Cup of Tea, the story of a samurai who repeatedly sees the image of a man living inside a cup of his tea.
They're not complex stories, but they are interesting, almost like a ghost story that you would tell a child. A lot of these stories end up being a little bit predictable, and my guess is that when you're watching it, you'll be able to guess the ending of a lot of the different sequences. The film is shot very theatrically. You can see a heavy kabuki influence in everything, from the score to the sets to the costuming. And it's a very interesting way of making a film because you don't see it very often. The film is shot very stylistically on a soundstage, and you can tell that the sets are sets. The backdrops are very obviously painted, but that does not mean that they're not complex and beautiful. A lot of movies are trying to be realistic. They want to show you reality. This is a film showing you something that is surreal. It's very expressionistic. It's very reminiscent of German Expressionism. My immediate thought when watching it is that it looks as though you're viewing a diorama or a small model. Like, you look at these things as a very detailed toys that have been painted and placed very specifically in this tiny world that you're viewing as a god. Even the costumes and the makeup make all of the actors and characters have this kind of waxy, unrealistic look to them. And the lighting is also very expressionistic and theatrical. There are lighting cues in the films that are super unrealistic, where a character will get spotted all of a sudden when they're feeling sad, or you'll see the color change to a deep, deep blue when one of the ghosts comes in the room. It's a style that I would like to see more of, modernized and updated. And if you can think of any movies that do that, please let me know in the comments, because I'd love to watch a modern film that is more technically updated, but uses this kind of very obvious, surrealist kind of showing you its techniques as it does them in a way that doesn't look like a mistake, in a way that shows you that it's intentionally trying to do this. So let me know if you can think of a film like that that's modern. As I was researching this film, a criticism that I saw kept coming up was that certain people said they didn't like it or it wasn't for them because it was too slow-paced and the effects were very dated, and that's a criticism that I will not deny. As you watch this film as a modern viewer, there is something that is lacking from our modern sensibilities, whereas if you see a horror film today, it has the ability to scare us, but this film is, if I'm being honest, not scary. That's not what this is. And I think it's okay to view older films with a critical eye and say, you know, we do this better now. That's okay. And I also kind of reject the argument that some people make when they talk about these old masterpieces, where they say, well, you have to think about the mindset of the people at the time. I actually don't think you need to do that in order to appreciate this film. I think you can watch this film as a modern viewer and still pick out a lot of elements that are interesting and effective and work even better than films today. It's like the effects, I would grant that a lot of them are dated, but there are even certain techniques and effects that they use in the film that are extremely impressive. For example, there's a scene where a character goes into hell, or what he imagines is hell, and there are these flags flying. They look like they're floating and flying. And I imagine they just use fishing line or something to make them look suspended in air. But the way that they float there is extremely impressive. And that's an old technique that they use that is in many ways a lot better than if you were to see that movie today and those would be computer generated flags or however they would do it. So these kind of techniques I think are important to pay attention to and look at. At the very end of the film, there's a composite that they do that is extremely, extremely creepy looking, and it looks really realistic. And we can, as a modern viewer, we can watch these and we can think about, okay, how did they do this technique back then? So the old way of compositing would be you would shoot the film, then you would rewind it back and reshoot again with, the same thing with the new character that you want to put into the scene on top of it. So a lot of times it looks a little cheesy, as in like the earlier parts of the film where you would have a ghost kind of walking and you can see kind of a transparent background of them. You can kind of see the world through them. But where the technique really works is when they have it in this, he's sitting in this black area. And so when you see that, you see, wow, this composite technique from the past really works in that way. So I think that's what is so impressive about older films, why I love watching older films. It's considering the ways that they were able to achieve things that are still impressive with older technology. That's what's cool about watching a film like this, and that's what we as viewers can pick up on and think about, like, wow, that I really think that looks amazing, and I know what kind of tools they were working with in 1964. It's not the same as what they do now. So it also maps on to a little bit of my philosophy on art, which is if effort and energy is put into something, that's what makes something impressive. You can tell that a lot of thought and a lot of effort and a lot of energy was put into this idea of making these flags fly or making this man sit in this dark area that looked like a ghost. We can take this same mindset of viewing the film through our modern eyes and not giving it a pass to the slowness and the stillness of the film. Yes, it is a bit boring, it's a bit long, but there's a lot of parts of the film where the slowness and the pacing really work to its benefit to create this extremely creepy vibe. And it's something that I think films today kind of reject because they're afraid to sit in that stillness. They're afraid, if they're making a horror film, they don't want people to get bored, so they're afraid to build up to that dread. Looking at a film like this, we can think about how are they doing this in each scene, how are they building this slowness, this creepy vibe. This film is touted by many film critics, many people, as a masterpiece. So as a modern viewer, when we sit and watch it, we're expecting something that is going to impress us, impress all of our sensibilities. And that might not be the case, but that doesn't mean that it's not a masterpiece. It doesn't mean that there's not a lot that we can learn and use from a beautiful, beautiful film like this. For example, the sets, the design, the idea of using surrealism in our films. Certain shots and certain things that we can take, or certain creepy moments that we can take and we can reuse in later films. I mean, and even if you're not an artist, if you're just a viewer, I think it's fun to recognize places that have reused the ideas from this film. For example, a film that we recently reviewed, Incantation, utilizes this creepy thing of painting Chinese characters all over a character's body. And I would be shocked if the director of Incantation didn't take that idea from this film. So older films like this, we can see how they're reused and how the creepy things are still being utilized today and the influence of them. And that's kind of the fun thing about viewing old films and seeing the progression of film history. And if you are an artist or a creator, that's the reason we need to keep viewing these older films and these older works, because there's a lot in them that we could take and we could use and can make our work richer and more interesting and more exciting and more unique. So we can take these older techniques and these older things that are dated and we can update them and kind of make them fit into our discerning way of viewing media. One final thing I'll note when discussing this film is I think it's very interesting when I was reading about the people criticizing the film and saying, oh, this is boring, or it was predictable, or it was this or that. Each one of them would kind of maybe mention like, oh, but I liked this story. This story was kind of good. And each of them had a different one that they liked. The first person would say, oh, I liked, The Woman of Snow. I thought that was pretty interesting, but the others were boring. Or I liked Hochi the Earless, but the other ones were boring. And I just found that a little bit funny, because to me, it does say that, well, everybody can get something out of each of these stories. And the fact that everybody finds a different one to latch onto kind of says to me that they all have a lot of merit, and that there's something to find within each of these pieces if you're looking hard enough. So definitely check out Kwaidan. It's a very, very interesting, if not challenging, piece to view. I would consider it like going to a museum or studying a very detailed piece of artwork or going to the theater. It's good for you. So check out Kwaidan, and let me know in the comments if you want me to review any other films. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.